Clear Lake Tea Party, and I'm also a broadcast activist with Raging Elephants Radio. And Raging Elephants Radio has got a number of broadcasters, and our business is all Texas. Texas news and politics, nothing but Texas. And if there was ever going to be a resource for those of you who have time to listen throughout the day, we were, up until a little while ago, doing 8 hours of live broadcasting every day on nothing but Texas. We're now only doing 7. But it is a monumental task to cover everything that's happening in Texas. The first topic I want to cover is open and/or constitutional carry. In this case, it became or. As you heard from Tanya at the very beginning, this was mandated not by politicians, but by grassroots and the delegates that represent the grassroots at the convention to be the priority for legislation for the 2015 session. That's because Texas is one of only 5 or 6 states in the entire union that does not provide for open carry. It infringes on your Second Amendment rights. I want to read to you, though, why we can't focus on your Second Amendment rights. Whenever you hear 2A or Second Amendment, that's not the battle in Texas. The battle in Texas is Article 1, Section 23 of our own Texas state constitution. That's where the battle is. So whenever you hear someone talking about their Second Amendment rights in Texas, we have Article 1, Section 23 that we need to fix. That was what was mandated by the Republican Party as a whole to send the politicians to Austin. That was supposed to be their number 1 priority. This is how Article 1, Section 23 reads right now. It's under the right to keep and bear arms. Every citizen shall have the right to keep and bear arms in the lawful defense of himself or the state, but, that one little word right there, but the legislature shall have power by law to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime. That language has been in there forever and a day. That is why it's going to require a constitutional amendment to remove that restriction from what is, I think we can all agree, deemed to be a God-given right, not a government-granted license, which is basically what your concealed handgun license is. Now, most of you know me. Most of you know that my background for years has been as a gun dealer. And I was subject to the laws and restrictions of the ATF. And it was my job to then kind of enforce those with my own clientele, with my own customers. This is something that is so fundamental to your freedom that even if you don't wear or carry your own arm, this is why it's so absolutely crucial to pay attention to this issue. Clearly, they had a mandate. They needed to take care of business in Austin. What we got instead was kind of a hodgepodge of various bills that were, some of them were carryovers from previous legislative sessions. The one, for instance, that's in here, Campus Carry, SB 11, that's a holdover. This was going to have to be a no-brainer. We've been wrestling over Campus Carry for years. That did pass, as it was predicted to pass, because it was always set up to be one of the crumbs that the legislature was going to throw to the conservatives out there so that you would all just calm down a little bit and not pay attention to the fact that they're not getting the real job done that they were sent there to do. And that was to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot or to, well, that was it. That was what they were mandated to do. Let's start it here up at the top. HJR 56 was supposed to be the constitutional amendment bill for true constitutional carry. That died in committee, never saw the light of day, and the committee was Homeland Security and Public Safety. Right now, I want you to understand something about the leadership. The leadership of the House is supposed to govern via the will of the House, and the will of the House is supposed to govern via the will of the people, right? What they have is a process set up where they can hide their failures and fake it till they make it, or don't. They'll just come back home and lie to you about it anyways. Because one of the most common tactics that they use in an overall strategy to delay, dilute, or destroy conservative legislation. Now, mind you, this is in a Republican-led legislature. That is their overall strategy. Delay, dilute, destroy conservative legislation. This is the tactic. They hide it in a committee and it never sees the light of day, and they never have to vote on it. It's not just open carry, it's for any of the other legislation as well. HB 195 was the bill carried by Jonathan Stickland, who is probably our most powerful conservative warrior, most uncompromising. Constitutional carry in the House. Again, never saw the light of day, died in the same committee, Homeland Security and Public Safety. They knew going into this session that they weren't going to handle this. And I'm going to get to that. Somebody in here was talking about Dan Patrick. We're going to talk about him in just a moment. HB 910 was the eventual open carry bill that did pass. It was just signed a couple of days ago by Greg Abbott, who staged it in an indoor shooting range. And that bill did pass. I'm going to get to the specifics of that. That is generally thought to mean that if you already have a CHL, or if you go and obtain one, you are then permitted to openly carry a handgun as long as it's in a shoulder or belt holster. We're going to tell you how you can wear your gun. So ladies, no thigh holsters, no ankle holsters. However you want to wear your gun is not relevant. You don't have the freedom to do what it is that you want, because the legislators are going to tell you how to wear your weapon. HB, let's see, I already talked about SB 11. HB 422 was relating to the enforcement of certain federal laws regulating firearms, accessories, and ammunition. That is another tactic. Calendars is the bottleneck. This is where conservative legislation, if they have to, if any of your committee members have to get a little bit of cred for voting something out of committee, they can do so knowing that it can always get choked in calendars. That's going to be the choke point. Lastly, HB 421 was about intrastate manufacture of a firearm, accessory, or ammunition. This died in committee, this time at the State Federal Power and Responsibility Committee. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about Dan Patrick, because as you mentioned, Dan Patrick campaigned very heavily on this issue. I have a cute little smug smirk picture of him here. Senator Dan Patrick, back when he was still senator, vowed that he would pass campus carry. Check. That's how we knew it was a gimme. He said, here's a curious term that he put on his own website, he would support open carry. Support. You gotta listen to the words they use and they don't use. And he also said he would expand Second Amendment rights in Texas. That truly admits that they're infringed upon in the first place in Texas, and that he has some power as a legislator to expand it, as opposed to simply abolishing the restrictions in the first place, acknowledging that you are not supposed to have that power. It has not been ceded to you by the people, but we're talking about politicians now. One of the very first things that happened, okay, let me back up for a second. What was happening all along, leading up to the legislative session, is that open carry advocates, there were multiple groups from all over Texas that were very well represented in Austin, had been already laying the groundwork for constitutional carry and open carry. The efforts were simultaneous. They were myriad. There was no doubt they were going to leave nothing to chance. These activists, they are single issue advocates. They were going to leave nothing to chance. So they'd already been making trips to Austin even before the legislative session started, and certainly for the freshmen, the incoming freshmen, they were representatives-elect. They hadn't even been sworn in yet. But certainly everybody knew this was coming, and with the full support of the Republican convention behind them, everybody thought, this is the year. In fact, the headlines that were running in the anti-constitutional carry media was, this is the year. This is the year for constitutional carry. Finally, Texas will join the rest of the country in removing the infringements on your constitutional right. What happened within the first week was very curious, and many of you will probably remember this. As Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick came out with a very oddly timed and almost careless statement. And I'll quote it to you in its entirety exactly. He was being interviewed by the Texas Tribune's Evan Smith, and this is at some early morning event. And Evan Smith asked Patrick if open carry was a done deal. Because we all assumed it was, right? The groundwork had been laid, everything had been done for years in advance. He also had a very conservative Senate. For the first time in memorable history, we had a very conservative composition of senators in the Senate. This is what Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said. He says, Second Amendment rights are very important, but the open carry does not reach the level of prioritizing at this point out of all the things that we've talked about. Remember, this was the mandate, right? He said, in fact, he didn't even think that there's support in the legislature to pass it. He added that the votes have not been there in the past and that little had seemed to change. If the votes materialized, he'd let it pass, but he wasn't going to be pushing for it. Focus on that last sentence. He'd let it pass. Oh, wait a minute. What did we have here in your campaign literature? You were going to let it pass? Who do you think you are, sir? What happened then was a firestorm erupted, and Mary already alluded to it. The advocates were like, wait a minute, what's happening here? This is not supposed to go down this way. Not only the advocates were saying that, the people who'd been expending their own time and money to campaign on this issue, but the legislators were like, needle on the record. At what point did this get agreed upon? We're 1 week into the session. We're not, it was like 5 days or 6 days into the session.
And he shut it down.
What happened then is the activists exploded and the legislature closed ranks. What we predicted at that time is, he just handed every milk toast, lily-livered, yellow-backed legislator out there, panty-wetting legislator out there, his calling card to say, I got your back, I got you covered, go ahead, we can kill this thing. And that was basically the license. That was basically what he was saying. And do you know, we predicted, we said, the guys in the House are going to use this, they're going to say, hey, the Senate told us we weren't going to pass this, they told us the votes weren't there. And don't you know that the author of the open carry bill, HB 910, is a guy named Larry Phillips. And he did indeed blame it on the exact reason. He said, we were told in the first week that the Senate didn't have the votes to pass this. Why should we bother? And he blamed it on the activists. Because the activists reacted in such a way that they said, no, accountability first. You said, you promised, this is ours for the taking. And in the process, there was one particular activist, it's now become a meme, it's become kind of a joke now that everything is Cory Watkins' fault. He's part of a Tarrant County open carry group, and he had visited one of the Democrat legislators, and he had been in a group. It was a real short little thing, you probably heard about it, but he said that they were going to, he says, I hope you enjoy your last session in the legislature because we're coming after you. Speaking like in the primary. That was Pancho Navarez, Democrat, and he wet his pants right there on the spot, and he demanded that the DPS give him a panic button because of the threats against him and his family. As if they were like death threats. We're talking about primary challenge. Anyways, that was parlayed in the news into this huge, the open carry activists are radical extremists and they're dangerous. Well, you're looking at some of them right here in this room. Some of the activists that were there.
Stop talking about them like that.
I'm talking about myself too. So what we had was, now we had the lieutenant governor of your state basically giving cover for what was to become a really messy, sloppy, kabuki theater on how they're going to kill open carry, how they're going to kill constitutional carry, and still point the finger at everyone else but themselves. One other thing I want to point out, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, in his own literature, and this is something that the Texas Grassroots Accountability Project does, is they make these candidates campaign against themselves. Well, here's your campaign, this is what you said in your campaign, and this is what you actually did. You're not even the same person. Dan Patrick said he would protect your right to defend your home. He would fight to allow campus carry. Here's a strong word that y'all know I love. He would nullify federal laws that go against our Second Amendment right to bear arms. Ooh, big boy. Tough stuff. He would keep government entities from falsely informing CHL holders that their concealed handgun is prohibited on the premises, and he would fight for open carry. What did he say up here? We don't have the votes. It's not a priority this legislative session. Is that the same guy?
No.
That's your lieutenant governor. It eventually gave political cover for all of the media attacks on the grassroots activists. They basically said, oh, the grassroots activists are too extreme, we have to kill it. Because we can't give these guys a win. What eventually happened then is that Patrick blamed inaccurate reports in the media. I just read to you what he said. We all understand English. He's like, oh, well, there were inaccurate reports, but we were all there. And we knew it, and we played it over and over and over again on Raging Elephants Radio. All right, so what ended up happening? Constitutional carry was pretty much told, we were told from the beginning it was out. There was a person in the House that was not going to let it go, and that was Jonathan Stickland with his HB 195. He was like, I'm not going to let it go. And what happened then was a huge divide in the very activists that were working for the same thing. The end goal is always going to be constitutional carry, but we had a number of activists that had been working this issue for so long, and they're like, oh, God, we got to take what we can get. And if all we can get is licensed open carry, that's what we got to fight for. And so what happened is you had licensed open carry by Larry Phillips up against HB 195, which is Jonathan Stickland's. Jonathan Stickland wouldn't let it go. But the House leadership hates him. He was their whipping boy this year. They cussed at him, they mocked him, they derided him, until the point where they wouldn't even let his bills be heard.
And she means on the floor. They cussed him out on the floor.
Yes.
They made fun of him.
This august body of legislators that we've all voted in and sent to Austin use words like, called him a dumbass. Excuse me, that's their word, not mine. He's hefty, he's large, he's a large man. And so one time when he was up debating a bill, they put a cookie on a string and they tossed it out. And they said, hey, fat boy, come and get your cookie, trying to lure him away from the podium. Charlie Cookie Monster Guerin is responsible for that. Joe Pickett, because it was now the thing of the day to do, booted him out of a transportation committee when he was up to have his bill heard on banning red light cameras, which everybody in here should be interested in, and booted him out without hearing his bill and falsified claims against him. And then sicked the Texas Rangers on an investigation on him, which eventually cleared him of all wrongdoing. This was utter harassment, pure and simple, because Stickland wouldn't let it go, and all of his colleagues wanted him to just shut up and sit down. You're making us look bad. He was derided, mocked, maligned, sidelined, and we, the grassroots, were cheering him on the whole time.
He never backed down.
He never backed down.
He ought to be the next speaker.
Right there up to the last minute of the last day of the legislative session. He was right there in the thick of it. So that's someone that we can be very proud of. Lastly, really quick, I know I'm killing my time here. When it came up between reconciling the bills between the Senate, on the Senate side there was an amendment by Senator Huffines. On the House side there was a dual amendment, dually sponsored by Dutton, who is a Democrat, and Rinaldi or Schaefer. It was,
From Hollywood.
I get them, there's 3 or 4 conservative maps, I get them all mixed up. It's not important, but basically that amendment said, okay, all right. If we have to take licensed open carry, then what we're afraid of is that the cops are going to use it as an excuse to detain and harass anybody who they see with a pistol on their belt, basically under a papers, please kind of detention program. And so they wanted to forestall that abuse of your Fourth Amendment rights, which is your right to not be searched or have your property seized without there being any commission or suspicion of a crime. That amendment was passed unanimously through the Senate. It eventually passed through the House, but with some wording difficulties. It never was reconciled and it was ripped out. So what that means now, according to Texas Law Shield, which is the organization that protects concealed handgun license holders, what that means now is that a person is not allowed, police can approach an open carry. He can detain them and ask for ID because there is reasonable suspicion to believe that they may be violating Texas Penal Code 4602, which I did not know. I did not know this. This was a nuance I did not know. What is Penal Code 4602? It is a general ban in Texas against a person not being allowed to carry a handgun, illegal knife, or club. They've completely removed your right to carry a weapon on your person, and the only thing allows it is the permit, the concealed handgun license permit. So they've stripped away your right and they've sold it back to you in the form of a license. So, the permit is your only defense against violating Penal Code 4602, and the permit is under Penal Code 4615. That's your only defense. So now what's happening with open carry is you can carry with a license, a concealed handgun license, which will now generally be just considered a handgun license. And it does not start until January 1st. Most laws go into effect September 1st, so please don't start open carrying your guns, ladies, on September 1st, because you can't open carry until January 1st. There was quite a bit of a to-do, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but I think you got the picture that you were sold out, and early on. One other thing is that campus carry did pass, but one of the nuances of the open carry bill is you cannot open carry on a college campus. You can conceal carry, but you cannot open carry, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be caught in the gray areas of these nuances.
Well, each school is allowed to, one of the deals with the campus carry is that each school will be able to determine which building you can carry in and which you can't. If it's any kind of hospital, medical facility, or something like that, you will not be able to carry.
So that concludes what I had to say about what happened with your constitutional carry. Does anyone have any questions about that? All right.